The spy network had been operating inside the military base for months, stealing classified information right under everyone's noses. When counterintelligence failed to identify them, the quiet court reporter who'd been transcribing legal proceedings for 3 years said, "I know who they are." What she revealed next about her undercover federal agent past explained why she'd been watching, listening, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing for more tales of unrecognized heroes. The military courtroom at Fort Richardson buzzed with the controlled formality of legal proceedings as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos positioned her stenography machine for another day of transcribing testimony. At 0800 hours, she settled into the corner chair that had become her permanent station over the past 3 years, preparing to document court-martial proceedings with the same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized every session she had covered. Maria's workstation offered an unobstructed view of the entire courtroom while maintaining the professional invisibility that court reporters cultivated as part of their craft. At 31, she had transcribed over 500 military legal proceedings, documenting everything from minor disciplinary actions to major security breaches with equal precision and discretion. Her stenography skills were exceptional, allowing her to capture spoken testimony at speeds that exceeded most practitioners in her field. But Maria's colleagues and the legal personnel she worked with daily had no reason to suspect that her abilities extended far beyond rapid transcription and legal documentation. What they didn't know was that Maria's background included 8 years as an undercover federal agent specializing in infiltration of criminal organizations, surveillance techniques that exceeded standard law enforcement training, and analytical skills that had exposed corruption networks across multiple federal agencies before her transfer to military service. The transition to court reporting had been deliberate, motivated by personal reasons she rarely discussed, and a desire for work that utilized her observational capabilities without requiring the psychological demands of undercover operations. For 3 years, she had found satisfaction in legal documentation that supported military justice while allowing her to remain professionally invisible. But Maria's trained eye had been noting patterns that extended beyond the legal proceedings she was officially documenting. Subtle behavioral indicators, inconsistent testimony details, and communication patterns that suggested coordinated deception among individuals who appeared unconnected to casual observation. This morning's proceedings involved the court-martial of Captain James Morrison, accused of violating operational security protocols by accessing classified information beyond his authorization level. As Maria transcribed testimony from various witnesses, her analytical mind was processing information through expertise that had once been critical to federal counterintelligence operations. The defendant was observed accessing classified databases on multiple occasions outside his assigned duty hours, testified Major Lisa Rodriguez, the security officer who had initiated the investigation against Morrison. His behavior pattern suggested systematic information gathering beyond legitimate operational requirements. Maria's fingers moved rapidly across her stenography machine, but her mind was cataloging details that wouldn't appear in the official transcript. Rodriguez's testimony contained micro-expressions and vocal patterns that suggested deception, while Morrison's reactions indicated genuine surprise at specific accusations rather than the defensive behavior typical of guilty parties. As the morning progressed, additional witnesses provided testimony that should have supported the case against Morrison, but Maria's analysis revealed inconsistencies that suggested a more complex situation than the charges indicated. Witnesses were demonstrating coordinated responses that implied prior consultation, and their detailed knowledge of Morrison's activities exceeded what casual observation would provide. During the lunch recess, Maria remained in the courtroom to review her transcription notes while legal personnel dispersed for their break. Her stenography records were comprehensive, but her mental notes included observations that would be significant to anyone trained in surveillance detection and behavioral analysis. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Wade, the presiding judge, returned early from lunch to review case documents at her bench. Wade had developed professional respect for Maria's transcription accuracy over multiple proceedings, though their interaction remained limited to procedural necessities. "Santos," Wade said, approaching Maria's workstation, "I wanted to commend you on your documentation quality. Your transcripts have been consistently thorough and accurate." "Thank you, ma'am," Maria replied with the professional courtesy that characterized all her interactions with military personnel. "I take pride in ensuring complete and accurate records." Wade studied the case files on her desk with obvious concern. The evidence suggests security violations, but something feels incomplete about the prosecution's narrative. Maria continued organizing her stenography notes while processing Wade's comment through analytical thinking she had hoped to keep separate from her current assignment. The incompleteness, Wade sensed, was likely related to the coordinated deception Maria had observed, but acknowledging such observations would require revealing expertise she had deliberately concealed. The afternoon session resumed with testimony from additional security personnel who claimed to have witnessed Morrison's unauthorized activities. But as Maria transcribed their statements, the pattern of coordinated deception became increasingly obvious to someone with her background in counterintelligence operations. Sergeant First Class Michael Chen testified about observing Morrison in secure areas during off-duty hours, providing details that were suspiciously specific and consistent with previous witnesses. Staff Sergeant Angela Torres corroborated Chen's testimony with additional observations that demonstrated improbable coordination between supposedly independent witnesses. Maria's analysis indicated that Morrison was being framed by individuals who possessed detailed knowledge of his activities, access to secure areas where they could plant evidence, and sufficient coordination to present consistent false testimony. The pattern was consistent with espionage operations she had investigated during her federal career. As the afternoon concluded and the court adjourned for the day, Maria found herself facing a moral dilemma she had hoped to avoid during her transition to military service. An innocent soldier was being framed for security violations by what appeared to be an organized spy network, and her specialized expertise might be necessary to prevent a miscarriage of justice. That evening, Maria remained in her quarters reviewing stenography notes that documented not just testimony, but behavioral patterns and inconsistencies that pointed to systematic deception. Her training in surveillance detection and counterintelligence analysis had identified a conspiracy that conventional military investigation had missed. The next morning brought news that elevated the situation beyond a single court-martial case. Colonel Harrison, the base commander, arrived at the courthouse with an expression that indicated developing security concerns that extended far beyond Morrison's alleged violations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison announced to the assembled legal personnel, "we have reason to believe that classified information has been systematically compromised over the past several months. We're implementing enhanced security protocols while counterintelligence investigates potential infiltration." Maria felt familiar analytical thinking engaging as she processed Harrison's announcement through expertise she had tried to suppress. The timing of Morrison's court-martial coinciding with broader security concerns suggested that his case was connected to the larger infiltration rather than being an isolated incident. Major Jennifer Park, the counterintelligence officer responsible for investigating the security breaches, addressed the assembled personnel with obvious frustration. "We're dealing with a sophisticated operation that has managed to access classified information without triggering standard security measures. The perpetrators appear to have detailed knowledge of our protocols and procedures." As Park outlined the investigation's challenges, Maria recognized patterns that aligned with her observations during Morrison's court-martial. The spy network was likely composed of individuals with legitimate access to secure areas who were coordinating their activities to avoid detection while systematically gathering intelligence. During the lunch recess, Maria made a decision that would fundamentally alter her carefully maintained professional invisibility. She approached Major Park with information that would require revealing aspects of her background she had deliberately concealed for 3 years. "Major Park," Maria said, approaching the counterintelligence officer with professional demeanor that masked her internal conflict, "I believe I have information relevant to your investigation." Park looked surprised by the approach from someone she knew only as the court reporter who documented legal proceedings. "Miss Santos, what kind of information?" Maria took a deep breath.
knowing that her next words would expose expertise she had hoped never to use in military settings. "Ma'am, I believe I've identified the spy network you're investigating. They're the same individuals who are framing Captain Morrison." The claim surprised Park, who studied Maria with new interest. "Miss Santos, those are serious accusations. What's the basis for your assessment?" "Ma'am, I have experience in counterintelligence operations that allows me to recognize patterns of coordinated deception," Maria replied carefully. "The testimony against Morrison demonstrates the kind of coordination typical of espionage networks." Park's expression shifted from surprise to intense curiosity. "What kind of counterintelligence experience?" Maria hesitated, knowing that her explanation would reveal the career she had deliberately left behind. "Ma'am, before joining the military as a court reporter, I was an undercover federal agent specializing in infiltration and surveillance of criminal organizations." The revelation hit Park with obvious impact. She stared at Maria as if seeing her for the first time, trying to reconcile the quiet court reporter with someone claiming specialized expertise in exactly the area she needed most. "Miss Santos, if you have that background, why are you working as a court reporter?" Park asked. The question touched on personal history that Maria had hoped to keep private, but the circumstances made continued concealment potentially harmful to national security. "Personal reasons, ma'am, but I believe my expertise might be relevant to your current investigation." Park made a decision with the rapidity that characterized successful counterintelligence operations. "Miss Santos, I'm authorizing you to provide detailed analysis of what you've observed. This investigation has been stalled for weeks." Over the next hour, Maria provided Park with comprehensive analysis of the behavioral patterns, coordination indicators, and deception techniques she had observed during Morrison's court-martial. Her assessment identified 5 individuals who were demonstrating the kind of synchronized behavior typical of organized espionage operations. The network consists of Sergeant Chen, Staff Sergeant Torres, Major Rodriguez, Captain Williams, and Lieutenant Beck, Maria explained, referencing individuals who had provided testimony or been present during sensitive proceedings. They've been coordinating their activities to gather intelligence while simultaneously framing Morrison to deflect suspicion. Park studied Maria's analysis with growing amazement. "Miss
Santos, this assessment is more comprehensive than anything our counterintelligence team has developed in 3 months of investigation."
"Ma'am, they made the mistake of operating around someone with surveillance training who they assumed was just documenting testimony," Maria replied. "Court reporters are invisible to most people, which made me an ideal observer for detecting their coordination." Park's investigation of Maria's identified suspects revealed evidence that confirmed the accuracy of her analysis. Within 48 hours, surveillance operations had documented the spy network's activities and gathered sufficient evidence for prosecution under espionage statutes. The arrests occurred simultaneously across the base, with each suspect taken into custody while attempting to transmit classified information to foreign handlers. The operation's success validated Maria's analytical capabilities while exposing a security breach that had been ongoing for over 8 months. Captain Morrison was immediately released and his charges dismissed as evidence revealed he had been systematically framed by the spy network to deflect attention from their own activities. His access to classified information had made him a convenient scapegoat for security violations actually committed by network members. Colonel Harrison summoned Maria to his office following the successful conclusion of the counterintelligence operation. His expression combined professional gratitude with obvious curiosity about the court reporter who had accomplished what his security team had been unable to achieve. "Ms. Santos, your analysis was instrumental in exposing a major security breach," Harrison said. "Major Park has briefed me on your background and your contributions to the investigation." "Thank you, sir," Maria replied, though her tone carried the same measured professionalism that had characterized her court reporting rather than satisfaction typically associated with successful undercover operations. Harrison studied Maria with new understanding. "Ms. Santos, I have to ask why someone with your qualifications chose to work as a court reporter rather than in counterintelligence operations." The question required Maria to address the transition from federal agent to military court reporter that had been motivated by personal reasons she rarely discussed. "Sir, I found that undercover operations required psychological demands that I preferred to avoid. Court reporting allowed me to use my observational skills in a less demanding environment." Harrison nodded with appreciation for personnel who understood their limitations and chose assignments that maximized their effectiveness. Ms. Santos, would you be interested in developing a role that combines court reporting with security analysis? Your unique position provides surveillance opportunities that conventional counterintelligence might miss. The offer represented a return to security operations that Maria had deliberately moved away from, but on terms that would allow her to maintain the legal documentation work she had found satisfying while contributing specialized expertise when needed. Sir, I'd be interested in exploring that possibility, Maria agreed. But I want to continue my primary assignment to court reporting. Today's situation was exceptional. Harrison smiled with understanding. Sometimes the most effective security measures are the ones that nobody suspects exist. As the immediate crisis concluded and normal base operations resumed with enhanced security protocols, Maria returned to her stenography machine in the military courtroom. But her relationship with legal proceedings had been fundamentally altered by the revelation of her specialized capabilities. For 3 years, she had successfully separated herself from counterintelligence operations, finding satisfaction in legal documentation that supported military justice without requiring the psychological demands of undercover work. But the spy network had demonstrated that her expertise remained relevant when national security was threatened by organized infiltration. 6 months later, the Santos Protocol had been implemented at multiple military installations, utilizing court reporters and other administrative personnel as inadvertent surveillance assets who could detect patterns that escaped conventional security measures. Maria continued transcribing legal proceedings with the same meticulous accuracy that had characterized her work for 3 years, but everyone now knew that the quiet court reporter possessed expertise in counterintelligence operations that had exposed a major espionage network. Sometimes, Maria reflected as she prepared her stenography machine for another day of legal proceedings, the most effective surveillance is conducted by people who are supposed to be invisible. When everyone assumes you're just taking notes, they forget that you're also watching, listening, and analyzing everything they do. The military courtroom continued its mission of legal proceedings, but with new understanding that administrative personnel could serve dual roles when their specialized backgrounds aligned with security requirements. Maria had proven that expertise in different domains could be combined when circumstances required comprehensive solutions. The spy network that had operated undetected for 8 months had been exposed not through sophisticated counterintelligence techniques, but through the careful observations of someone who had been trained to see patterns that others missed. And sometimes, the most dangerous person to a criminal conspiracy is the one they assume is harmlessly documenting their activities. Her stenography machine sat ready for another day of transcribing testimony, but everyone now understood that the court reporter who seemed focused solely on legal documentation was also conducting surveillance operations that protected national security. Maria Santos had demonstrated that the most effective counterintelligence assets are often those who appear to be doing completely different jobs.